Тема Украины уже много лет остается одной из самых горячих как в Европе, так и во всем мире. Что происходит в стране сегодня? Насколько тернист европейский путь Украины? И когда можно ожидать стабилизации обстановки? Об этом в интервью с министром иностранных дел Украины Павлом Климкиным. Mr. Klimkin, I'm very glad to welcome you in Estonia. Although your visit here is about to end, right after the interview you have your flight. Now, can you tell us, this visit in Estonia, was it successful? Were any agreements reached during this visit?
Absolutely. It's indeed a special atmosphere here. And I'm glad we were able to start with my colleague and friend, Maria Kalirant, this visit on visiting 5 Ukrainian soldiers who are being treated now in Estonian hospital for rehabilitation. And it's simply important to feel how the atmosphere for them has been created here. It was very important emotional start. Of course, our discussion was focused on Minsk agreements and how we need to keep pressure on Russia in order to get Russia to implement Minsk. Of course, about European agenda, but also about bilateral issues, where we have ambitious plan how to use Estonian experience on, for example, e-services to be implemented in Ukraine. Actually, also for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but also for other Ukrainian authorities. It's not, of course, limited to e-services. It's about agriculture. It's about oncoming business fora. It's about Estonian assistance. It's about possible twinning projects. How to assist Ukraine to implement EU-Ukraine Association Agreement.
Can you tell that Estonia is a strategically important partner for Ukraine?
Definitely. And it's not only about atmosphere of friendship, it's also about a network of important projects. It's also about readiness and willingness here to help Ukraine on the way to reforms. So Estonia is indeed very important for Ukraine.
Well, people in Estonia and actually in the whole world have witnessed for many years the situation in Ukraine, especially for the last 2.5 years. Can you, looking back, say us what the mistakes were done that led to the situation that Ukraine facing now?
I believe we should not talk about mistakes, but it was important to have this kind of solidarity on the part of the European Union, on the part of G7. But of course, it was important, as it's important now, to have very committed reaction to Russian actions, to the Russian aggression, because my point is that Russia has been waging a hybrid war against Ukraine in a military sense, in an economic sense, in the sense of propaganda. But in the same way, Russia has been waging war against the European Union, also imposing Russian propaganda and trying to weaken up Europe. So we have common challenge and we have the common cause to fight.
This is good, this is important, but still I want to stress the previous question. Do you think the country has to take responsibility or not? Or it was not fault of Ukraine because of the situation?
Look, what kind of fault of Ukraine you are talking about?
So you mean there have been no mistakes done by politics in Ukraine?
Look, we have Russian aggression. We have Crimea.
But it didn't happen just because I think there were some actually things that led to this situation. For example, people live in scarce conditions. There is actually problems with laws, there is corruption, oligarchy.
Are you trying to find justification
No.
for occupation
No.
of Crimea or for Russian aggression against Ukraine?
No, I'm trying to ask
So,
if...
for me, it's completely wrong narrative. Secondly, of course, Ukraine probably is not an ideal country. And under previous Yanukovych regime, there were, attempts and a lot of mistakes in the sense of running Ukraine. But if you try to come up with the idea that such mistakes could be found as a sort of justification for Russia breaking any kind of legally binding commitments and political commitments, occupying part of another country, waging now a war in Donbass, is completely different narratives. And if you know that our former president Yanukovych is now in Russia, and actually many from our former government are now also in Russia, and it's also for me very symbolic. So any kind of aggression, and it's my point, could not be justified in this sense, because Russia broke in a very targeted and consistent way the whole European system of security, the whole post-war system of security. And because we live in Europe, in a rule-based world, we have to come back to the understanding of international law and to our understanding of values.
I was asking about mistakes just because I wanted to know if Ukraine is learning from the past mistakes.
Look, everybody has to learn. Learning by doing is an important principle. We have a changing world around us, and we need to learn how to adjust to this world. But in any case, it could not be found as justification for Russian actions. And Russian aggression is indeed unique because it's the sole precedent when a country which is a member of UN Security Council and a nuclear country invaded another country, breaking any, and I mean any kind of commitments.
Now, the main claims of the European Union to Ukraine is war, oligarchy, and corruption. Do you agree that these three problems actually keep Ukraine back from developing?
Russian aggression is definitely an issue because of Russian aggression, because of temporary occupation of Crimea and Russian aggression in Donbass, Ukraine lost almost 20% of its industrial potential. It's indeed a challenge. It's not a sort of excuse for not driving forward reforms. What we've been doing, excuse is not a way forward.
I agree. War for any country is a tragedy. That's true. But what about two other points, oligarchy and corruption?
Exactly. Corruption is an important challenge. Many Ukrainian authorities were endemically corrupt in the previous Ukraine, but now it's a way forward for Ukraine in the sense of creating completely new infrastructure in the system on fighting corruption. It has been done with the assistance of the European Union and United States, Anti-Corruption Bureau, Corruption Prevention Bureau, both now in operation, complete reshuffle of national police, which is underway. For example, traffic police was a symbol of corruption in Ukraine. Now you can drive around any kind of city in Ukraine without being asked for a bribe. And of course, if you talk about business clans or let's call them oligarchs, the influence is still there definitely, but it's fundamentally reduced because we can't eradicate the previous system from one day to another. But in the previous Ukrainian system, influence on politics and media is definitely not there. So we are on the way forward, and this way should lead us to a European and democratic country.
How would you explain the fact that your president, Petro Poroshenko, is running his own business, although he promised to sell it as soon as he gets into the highest office? Also, his name recently appeared in Panama's papers. Should it be acceptable in a democratic country?
2 points on that. Firstly, the president is not running any kind of business. He delivered on his promises
In which way?
to hand over his business to a blind trust in the way which is recognized and accepted. You know, when a businessman becoming a politician, so the business assets simply had been handed over to a blind trust. So there is no in any way steering businesses by the president. And secondly, you know, the way how this blind trust has been created, and it's reflected in Panama Papers, and now it's recognized fact that it's in no way, so to say, was tax evasion there. So it's the normal civilized way to hand businesses to a blind trust. Now we have clearly legal view on that, and it's widely recognized. So let's don't speculate with any kind of possibilities that the president has been running business himself. It's simply rubbish.
Okay, but how would you explain that president's rating is now going down, and now it's about 70% only, and it's even less than Yanukovych had before Euromaidan?
Look, for me, it's a very tricky comparison. I would not.
Okay, we can forget about the
yes,
comparison, but 70% is quite
let's
low.
let's forget about Yanukovych
Okay.
rating.
Forget it.
Because the reliability of that rating is, for me, a big question.
Okay.
In the sense of anybody's rating, you know, and in the sense of any political force, and reliability is indeed the issue. It's, of course, about extremely high expectations for all Ukrainians in the sense of reforms. They understand that Russia has been waging a hybrid war against Ukraine. But in the same way, they expect reforms, you know, going in a very speedy way and bringing immediate results. And it's a kind of overall point for any political force. But in the sense of what has been delivered, it's also clear recognition by Ukrainians, if you see any kind of opinion polls, that it's exactly the president who is behind shaping up and building up our military forces. It's exactly the president who is behind shaping up foreign policy, but also, for example, such extremely important points like anti-corruption strategy or judicial reform. Very important voting with the constitutional majority last week on the judicial reform is a good example for that.
So, are you telling that Petro Poroshenko actually is the leader of the country?
Absolutely. It's exactly what I mean.
It was interesting when we saw that Ukrainian government has invited a lot of foreign managers. I can name a few like Mikhail Saakashvili, Yannick Merilo from Estonia, Aivaras Abramavicius. Can you explain this move by your government? Is it because you don't have this kind of specialists in the country, or it has something to do with corruption and you don't trust your specialists?
Let's not have simply drawing parallels among many people. Some of these managers, for example, people who were behind Georgian reforms, national police, for example, were and are important for driving forward these reforms. So you can't, pick up one name and say it's reflecting the overall tendency. For me, what was important and what I believe is right is to engage people who are trusted people and who have proven record on reforms. For example, a couple of Georgian managers. But generally, any country on the way of reforms need knowledge, and injection of this knowledge need experience and injection of this experience. So it's exactly the reflection, but in the sense of number of managers you've just mentioned, it's just a tiny point in the whole picture.
But still, why you invited them?
No, it was invitation on behalf of different authorities in the sense of advice or in the sense of experience. One point I mentioned that, for example, a couple of Georgian managers who were behind national police reforms. We needed such experience and we needed to start reform in a very speedy way. It's exactly the rationale behind it.
By rough estimation, now in Estonia we have about 1,000 Ukrainian refugees that fled the country. Do you expect these people back, and when they can come back to peaceful country again?
Firstly, we have more than 1.5. I hate this bit of the bureaucratic terminology, IDPs, internally displaced persons. It's actually the people who were forced to leave Donbass. And it's the major point for us, because we need to care for these people, and we need to ensure that these people have a say for the fate of Donbass. So they have to get right to vote in the future free and fair elections after we get security in Donbass. And of course, it's important that these people could get elected, because it's their constitutional right.
When this might happen?
Security first. And unfortunately, Russia is not interested in getting more security in Donbass. It's actually the other way around. And after that, what kind of election can you imagine without a reasonable level and sufficient level of security? And we understand what kind of security we need to start the electoral campaign. But generally, of course, we need all our people back. They should work, together as a country for building up European and democratic Ukraine.
Does Ukraine want to be part of European Union and NATO?
Look, definitely, European Union is our goal. We should be part of European project, because Ukraine belongs to the European Union by history, by mentality, and in the sense of commitment of European values. In the sense of NATO, we need consensus in NATO about future Ukrainian membership. What we should do now is to upgrade Ukraine defense and security sectors up to the NATO standards. And it will be the main point for the oncoming Ukraine-NATO Commission during the NATO summit in Warsaw.
So I know that actually Ukrainian people, according to some surveys, actually support the idea of Ukraine getting closer to the European Union. Now it's about 70% of the population.
Yes,
supports.
exactly.
But in April there was held a referendum in the Netherlands. and people were asked if they support the idea of this association agreement between the European Union and Ukraine, and 61% said they do not support this idea. Can you tell us what Ukraine can give to the European Union people so to become more attractive partner?
Yeah, it's a good point, but let's not overestimate this referendum, because it was not about the association agreement. Yeah, I would even say it was not about Ukraine. It was mainly about Eurosceptic attitude of many Dutch people towards the European Union. But in the sense of Ukraine becoming a part of European project, indeed, it's about us, it's about Ukrainians who are committed Europeans, which is the main asset of Ukraine. And European project, and it's my personal conviction, is not possible without Ukraine as a part of this project. And I will, keep working very committedly on getting Ukraine into this European project.
So you are saying that actually the result of the referendum in the Netherlands didn't cause any troubles for Ukraine?
No, I don't see any, real trouble for Ukraine in the sense of public perception in Netherlands. It's definitely a challenge, but we have to overcome this challenge. We have many challenges. In the sense of running up to the referendum, it was a unique opportunity to explain to many Dutch people the cause about Ukraine, but the majority of them was keen actually on the Eurosceptic attitude, but not about Ukraine. And as you understand, practically no one was able to read the agreement or even to understand what is, importance of this agreement, both for Ukraine and for the European Union. So we need a kind, in the sense of, repeating such event. My point, we need a sort of consistent political campaign by everyone in the sense of our political responsibility to explain to everyone what it's all about.
So regardless the referendum in the Netherlands, you feel the support of Europeans?
Absolutely.
Great. Two more topics I really want to touch. Now in Europe, including Estonia, we see that right-wing and nationalist parties have got more support than usually. We accounted for refugee crisis in Europe. A few weeks ago, a popular Ukrainian musician, Sviatoslav Vakarchuk, delivered a speech where he actually stressed that his country is now built upon bloody patriotism. Do you agree that patriotism in Ukraine has radicalized?
Look, not at all, firstly. I don't know in what kind of context,
Vakarchuk said
he said it. It's important. I know him quite well, and I know his attitude. I know his views. My understanding is that Ukrainians actually see Ukraine as a future for every one of them. And in this sense, it's about us. It's about our understanding of European values. It's about our understanding of democracy. And our patriotism is commitment to such understanding. It's how I see it.
But now Nadezhda Savchenko, she returned back home, and now she's an MP in Rada.
Yeah.
Is she actually qualified for this work, or it's something has to do with this patriotism?
Look, of course she is qualified. She is a real hero for
but to
everyone
be here
of
and
us.
to be MP, a bit two
Look,
different things.
MP should be a real politician, and politicians should care about Ukraine. in a real way. And Nadia does care about Ukraine. It's a point.
About Eurovision. So congratulations.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, your country won this contest this year, but rumor has it that actually the results didn't satisfy some countries. How do you interpret the results of this competition?
Eurovision is not about satisfying countries. Eurovision is about people. It is about people voting.
And no politics?
No, not at all. It was, Jamala is a great singer. And it was a song going from her heart. It was not about playing up any kind of politics during Eurovision. It was about her personal point about the fate of her people. And in this sense, it was a real touch with the people of Europe, and it's exactly how I understand these results.
Did you like the song?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that we're running out of time, but there is one question, maybe a bit politically incorrect, definitely off topic. Can I ask it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. I know that you were born in Kursk.
Mm-hmm.
You studied at one Moscow universities, and I know that actually you speak perfectly Russian. My native language is also Russian, but I was told that this interview I should do in English. Why is it so?
My point is simple. Our point is about Russia breaking laws and commitments. It's about Russian leadership, but it's not about Russian language. We all can communicate in Russian. It's not about our preference, but it's about our commitment. And I have my understanding of values, and I have my understanding of commitments. And we need to stick to our values and our commitments. And the key value, as we understand, is democracy and freedom. It's my personal understanding, and I will follow this understanding as a politician and as a person, if you like, as a human. This is my answer.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure.